Hey everyone, and welcome back. This is Keith Rowe with Vital Healing. I want to share something with you today that I've been sitting with for a while. And it started with a quote that I came across from Benjamin Franklin. And it was something he wrote in 1753 about people who had been captured by Native Americans and then later ransomed back to colonial society. And he had noticed that they kept escaping back to native communities at their first opportunity. And that seems kind of counterintuitive to what maybe we've been taught about those times and back in the early colonial days. And he observed that they were escaping back into those native communities. And this observation sent me down a path looking at what actually happened on the frontier and what it might could tell us about what we're searching for now. And the piece that I'm going to read is called When Convenience Stops Being Enough, Finding Our Way Back to Community. And it's about that restlessness that so many of us feel, the sense that we have everything we need, but still something's missing. And it's about what Mary Jemison and other colonial observers saw that might help us understand why. This isn't a how-to piece. It's more of an invitation to just pay attention to something that's been with us for a long time. So settle in and let's get ready and explore this together. When convenience stops being enough, finding our way back to community. We live with a level of convenience that would have stunned every generation before us. Fresh food delivered in minutes, water, heat, and light on demand, constant connection through screens that never sleep. These comforts give us more personal freedom than our ancestors ever knew. Yet many of us still feel restless and strangely empty. I believe that part of the reason is because convenience can expand freedom, but it cannot replace what community once provided. When life becomes easy to manage alone, then sometimes we drift away from the relationships and shared rhythm that once made us feel more rooted. And the emptiness we feel today is nothing new. It comes from a hunger that has lived in people for a long time. In 1753, Benjamin Franklin wrote a letter that captured something puzzling. He was writing about white captives who had been taken by Native Americans and then later ransomed back to colonial society. When white persons of either sex have been taken prisoners young by the Indians and lived a while among them, though ransomed by their friends, yet in a short time they become disgusted with our manner of life and take the first good opportunity of escaping back into the woods. Franklin wasn't romanticizing. He was observing a pattern that troubled colonial observers. They noticed that people were choosing to return to native communities even after being, quote, rescued. And one of the clearest stories comes from Mary Jemison. She was taken captive as a teenager during the French and Indian War, and she was adopted by the Seneca. The journey to their territory was brutal. They were traveling on foot for hundreds of miles, carrying a child on her back, sleeping out on the wet ground. But when she arrived, something unexpected happened. And she writes, "We were kindly received by my Indian mother and the other members of the family, who appeared to make me welcome, and my two sisters, whom I had not seen in 2 years, received me with every expression of love and friendship. The warmth of their feelings, the kind reception which I was met with, and the continued favor that I received at their hands, riveted my affection for them so strongly that I am constrained to believe that I loved them as I should have loved my own sister had she lived, and I had been brought up with her. She lived with the Seneca through peacetime years between the wars. About those years, she said, "No people can live more happy than the Indians did in times of peace. Their lives were a continual round of pleasures. Their wants were few and easily satisfied, and their cares were only for today. If peace ever dwelt with men, it was in former times, in the recesses from war, amongst what are now termed barbarians." Years later, after the Revolutionary War, her adoptive brother offered her complete freedom to return to white society, and her son Thomas wanted to go with her, but she refused. Her reasoning was striking. She had a large family of Indian children and feared her white relatives would despise them, if not myself, and treat us as enemies, or at least with a degree of cold indifference which I thought I could not endure. But there was also more than just fear. She had found something that she didn't want to leave. She married within the Seneca, she raised her children there, and she lived the rest of her life in that community. When her narrative was recorded when she was in her 80s, the interviewer noted that, quote, "her neighbors speak of her as possessing one of the happiest tempers and disposition," end quote. She lived surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren on the land along the Genesee River. The life she chose gave her what she needed, and not just to survive, but to flourish. What Franklin observed and Jemison lived, J. Hector St. John de Crèvecoeur documented in detail. He was a French-born observer, and he spent many years on the frontier. He wrote in 1782 of an Englishman and a Swede who had been captured, adopted into native families, and later they were offered substantial ransoms of money to return home, and they both refused. Their reasoning, he said, would greatly surprise you. The most perfect freedom, the ease of living, and the absence of those cares and corroding solicitudes which so often prevail amongst us. What struck Crèvecoeur most was the directional imbalance. Thousands of Europeans are Indians, and we have no example of even one of those aborigines having from choice become European. For him, this revealed something essential, that native communities were offering something more congenial to our native dispositions than the fictitious society in which we live. He had witnessed parents searching for children after wars only to find them so perfectly Indianized that many knew them no longer, and those whose more advanced ages permitted them to recollect their fathers and mothers absolutely refused to follow them and ran to their adoptive parents for protection. For these observers, Franklin noting the pattern, Jemison living it, and Crèvecoeur documenting it, the evidence was unmistakable. People were not simply turning away from their old world. They were stepping into a form of life that held freedom and belonging side by side, a way of being that felt closer to what a human life is meant to carry. The pull that we are talking about has never disappeared. It rises beneath our restlessness and beneath our longing for something deeper than comfort. It surfaces whenever convenience fails to answer the questions that matter, and whenever the fast-paced life leaves the heart hungry. At the center of all of this is a longing for a more human way of living. Convenience can meet our needs, but something deeper still goes unnourished. Most of us want connection that feels natural and unforced, and we want freedom that does not cut us off from community. The two belong together. When they drift apart, we begin to lose our sense of meaning and place in the world. Life becomes efficient, yet it no longer feels like it is feeding the parts of us that want to belong and contribute. Answering this call is not about going back in time. It's about coming back to ourselves. We are shaped for relationship, for reciprocity, and for the rhythm of life that honors both individuality and belonging. What we're searching for draws our attention to quieter truths, that we want lives that feel real, and that connection is part of our nature. It begins with attention, with choosing presence over speed, and letting the living world steady us again instead of rushing past it. And as we come to know ourselves more clearly through this attention, we begin to understand where our restlessness comes from and what we're really hungry for. That clarity makes it possible to reach towards others who share the same longing and to build connections that convenience promised but could never deliver. Take a moment this week, if you have time, to step outside without any goal in mind. Maybe leave your phone behind or put it in your pocket on silent, and walk slowly and breathe deeply. Notice what draws your attention. It might be bird call, maybe the movement of water, or just the way the air settles on your skin. And then ask yourself, gently, with no pressure, what part of my life is asking for something more real than convenience? So that's the piece. And I know these stories can feel distant. 18th century frontiers, captured colonists, and a world that's so different from ours. But the hunger underneath it isn't distant at all. It's right here with us. It's the thing that makes us stop scrolling and wonder why we feel so alone. It's what makes us crave something deeper than the next convenient transaction. So here's what I want to leave you with. We don't have to have all the answers about community or belonging right now. We don't really even need a plan. What we need is to start paying attention to where we feel the pull. Those moments when something in us says, this feels real, or this feels empty. And maybe it's a conversation that went deeper than small talk, or a moment when you helped someone and you felt needed. Or maybe it's the ache that you get when you're surrounded by people, but you still feel alone. And pay attention in those moments. You don't have to fix it. There's no need to try to solve anything right then. Just notice. Because once we start noticing, we begin to understand what we're actually hungering for. And that understanding, that clarity, is how we start finding our way towards the others who are hungering for the same things. And the practice that I offered of going outside without a goal, that's simply about asking for something more real. So try it if you have time and see what comes up. Just be curious. One way I build community is by creating a space for a free monthly breathwork each month. And you're welcome to join. Like I said, it's free and it's open to anyone who wants a gentle space to breathe and arrive back in the present moment. You can follow the link in the show notes, or there's a link at the bottom of the Substack article. You can click on that link and you can go learn more and join the mailing list. So thank you for being here with me on this vital healing journey as we find our way back to ourselves and back to each other. Until next time.